Today on Hearts of Heroes, a woman gets trapped in a raging storm surge.
It's hard to imagine how fast that water was coming in.
There was this surge coming right at me.
That water is going to continue to rise, and so that was going to be a huge problem.
Plus, an entire town is devastated by an historic flood.
Every house went underwater.
You jump out and you're in waist-deep water.
With lives on the line, first responders will stop at nothing to get the job done.
When you think about hurricanes, you probably imagine pelting rain and ravaging winds. But the #1 loss of life and property is storm surge. I've seen 10 to 15-foot surges twist homes from their foundations and wash them down the street in just seconds.
In September of 2022, one Florida resident found herself driving straight into one of these floods, and it would take heroic actions to get her out safely.
Naples, Florida is a tropical oasis situated on the Gulf of Mexico.
We have 9 miles of shoreline and, of course, all of our intercoastal.
Our beaches are some of the best in the country. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
But paradise can sometimes have a dark side. This time in the form of hurricanes. In September of 2022, the Gulf Coast was preparing for Hurricane Ian to make landfall.
We had a projected path that took it well north of here. That's where we'd expected to see this thing go.
Susan Lewis, who lives in Naples, was paying close attention to the storm's size and trajectory.
I was hearing that it wasn't so bad, but it was very windy. And when I left for work, I called my office and I said, "How is it over there?" "We're good." And I said, "Okay." So I headed towards work.
At the last minute, the storm changed paths and it hit more into the North Fort Myers area.
It ended up making landfall a lot closer than we thought it was going to. With that, of course, comes the potential of storm surge.
Hurricane's just a big, giant storm in the middle of the ocean that is spiraling up and building up power. So as it moves, this wall of water moves with it.
When the storm moves on, the water rushes back in, and it rushes back in super fast, where it comes up and over the beaches, it comes up and over seawalls, barrier walls.
Susan did not know that she was heading straight into the dangerous surge.
I took a right-hand turn, and when I got halfway down, there was this surge coming right at me, and there was nothing I could do. It just kept coming. Then it hit my car. My dashboard lit up, my doors locked, my trunk flew open, and I knew that I was stuck.
Susan knew that she had to find a way out, but the water had damaged her car's electrical system, and her doors were locked. Unable to escape, she called 911.
911, what's your emergency?
By this time, the powerful winds were too dangerous for first responders to use many of their larger rescue vehicles.
The higher the vehicle is, the more susceptible it is to the winds, so it could be more likely to get blown over.
So once winds reach over 35 miles an hour, we stop responding out because we have high-profile vehicles and it's a hazard for them being tipped.
But the Naples Fire Department did have some smaller trucks at their disposal.
We do have vehicles that we typically use for brush fires.
So our brush truck is a multi-use vehicle. We use it for brush fires to get into areas that normal vehicles can't get into. It's a lifted truck with massive tires on it, has a lot more capabilities of getting into rougher situations.
Rescuers started dispatching the few brush trucks that they had. Meanwhile, Susan tried everything she could to get out of her car.
Everything shut down, and as I'm pulling the handle, trying to get it unlocked, hitting my buttons, nothing was working.
Coming up,
The water drastically rose.
It was up to my chest. It was coming in fast.
and later, a California city is underwater with countless lives at risk.
Took his shirt off and went in chest deep water just to rescue those horses.
But first, some advice should you or your young ones get caught in a storm.
There is no denying that major storms can cause anxiety, especially in children.
Tackle storm anxiety head-on with your family by creating a preparedness plan and involving your children in the conversation. Allowing a young person to talk through their fears will let you address their worries directly.
Keep the conversation going and revisit your plan often. When it comes to helping children face the unknown, the key is communication.
As Hurricane Ian was barreling into Florida's Gulf Coast, Susan Lewis had unknowingly driven her car straight into the storm surge. When the water hit, her car's electrical system seized. Now she was trapped inside her car with no way out.
She was in a very dangerous situation. Another minute or two, it could have turned out to be disastrous.
Naples firefighter Matthew Don and Lieutenant Bill Warren heard the emergency dispatch come through.
We were headed to another call when we heard this call come in.
Hey, that storm surge is moving in, and you're the only vehicle that can get there.
We started to get a little closer to the area of the call. It was up over the 6-foot mark.
When I called, it was up to my ankles. And by the time they had arrived, it was up to my chest. It was coming in fast.
It's hard to imagine how fast that water was coming in, but more importantly, how fast it was rising.
They knew they had to make this rescue fast.
What we wanted to do was get her out of that vehicle. That water is going to continue to rise, and so that was going to be a huge problem.
They had to come up with an immediate strategy.
I saw the 3 guys get out, and they talked among themselves very quickly, have a game plan, and then they had a rope. They also had a vest for me.
When we approached the vehicle, I had asked her to unlock her door. She said, the door won't unlock, it won't unlock. And because of how fast things were developing, the decision was made almost immediately to just break out the back window. We broke out the back window and were able to kind of reach around, unlock that door, and get it pushed out.
We got her out of the vehicle. We put a personal flotation device on her as well, and then we tied off the safety rope to her.
But the rising water posed another threat.
Once the surge comes in, it can bring down power lines, brings in all kinds of animals, snakes, especially here in Florida.
The only thing I kept thinking about was, is there anything in this water that's going to bite us? Because there's fish, there's everything in the water.
Once they got Susan loaded into the truck, their vehicle had its own malfunction.
The transmission was not going into reverse. It actually wasn't responding to anything.
The truck shifted itself into 6th gear, and it would not come out of 6th gear.
This is salt water that's coming in, wreaks havoc on electrical components, especially in vehicles.
Unable to bring the truck away from the rising water, they had no choice but to drive directly into it.
The decision was made to move forward because that was the only way that we could go.
His instruction to me was just get us out of here.
By now, the winds were whipping.
All I'm thinking is don't stop. The truck at this point was damaged, and my initial concern was get us to a point in a place where we can seek refuge and we can have a safe place to hide out.
They pushed their vehicle to its limit and finally made it to high ground and a sheltered shopping center where they waited for close to 3 hours. Once the storm quieted, they got Susan to safety.
It felt great to get out of all the wet clothes and get comfortable again.
Within hours, Susan had become a viral sensation. Millions had been riveted by her rescue online.
I got to work and everybody at work knew about it. And then I get people coming downstairs telling me, my daughter saw you in Switzerland. My niece saw you in Ireland.
Despite her newfound fame, Susan learned an important lesson.
I should have stayed home. I should have not gone out thinking it was okay. It was a very serious storm. I was really happy to see you all when you did arrive because I knew the water was rising quickly.
As luck would have it, we just happened to be in the right place when the call came in, because for a period of time, we're not able to go out of the station at all.
I definitely want to thank you, Matt and Cody. With all my heart, you are genuinely my new heroes, and you'll always remain that to me. They mean a lot to me. They really do. I mean, each one in their own way. They came forward and each one was concerned and caring. They absolutely are my heroes.
Coming up, a small town faces a massive flood.
I was like, it's gonna happen. I just didn't know how bad it was gonna get.
First responders dedicate their lives to saving lives. It's often dangerous work.
And as you're about to see, rescuers need skill, but the job requires more than that. Quick thinking and fast action can often make the difference between life and death.
Planada, California, in Merced County, sits in the shadow of the Sierra National Forest.
The mountains surround us. Yosemite's not that far from us.
We have the Merced River, we have lakes, we have Lake Yosemite, we have the San Luis Obispo Reservoir. So we have different waterways.
In January of 2023, Planada began bracing for a powerful atmospheric river aimed right at them.
It would continue to rain and rain and rain. And the snow in the hills is predominant because when it melts, it all comes to the Merced County. And it started filling our aqueduct, the waterways that we've had here.
Planada Elementary School sits on the banks of one of those waterways.
We started to see that Miles Creek was starting to rise at a high rate.
We were told that we were looking at the possibility of the levee spilling over and that we could flood.
In preparation, the school's maintenance team began to stack sandbags, but their efforts would be futile. The levee couldn't hold the pressure, and the onslaught began.
We went to one of the canal banks we knew was getting close to breaking over the top, and I was like, it's gonna happen. I just didn't know how bad it was gonna get.
When the water started to come in at knee high for staff, we just had to make a call. They needed to evacuate. It was just no longer safe to be on campus.
By then, most of the school was flooded.
It wasn't just the school that was in danger. By now, the entire town was under siege. An evacuation alert was sent out, but many people didn't want to go or were unable to get out.
And within an hour, it went from a few inches to a few feet. And we started getting calls and calls just back to back. Hey, we need help.
As you can see, it has the smoke on the top, so it's meant to go into high water.
This is one of our dive rescue boats. It was able to get around debris and up to the houses so we can get close enough to get people into the boat.
This is one of our high water rescue vehicles. The weight allows it to stay grounded.
All of these specialized rescue vehicles would prove invaluable. By that evening, most of the town was underwater.
We started mobilizing the vehicles and driving out there. And we almost started our rescues within an hour, just nonstop. We'd get 15 people in the truck and move out, 15 people in the truck and move out.
I've been here almost 44 years and never had anything like this happen. We've had flooding, but nothing to this extent.
You jump out and you're in waist deep water. It's a weird feeling. I mean, that's something that I hope I never have to experience again.
Hundreds of people were rescued that day, but the heroics did not stop with humans.
You have people that have pets.
Coming out.
And then you have cattle, you have horses.
We had 8 stranded horses that we found the water was up to their backs. So it was in dire straits because they'd been in the water probably 24 hours at this point.
Scared, freezing, and on the verge of hypothermia, the horses were unable to get out of a locked stall. Sheriff Warnke and his team jumped in a mud boat and made their way to the animals.
One of the horses was so cold and so fatigued, he was going underwater. Been in there for 24 hours. I was getting ready to jump in. The sergeant in charge of my animal services hollered at me, "Don't do it."
Coming up, no human or animal is safe from these catastrophic floodwaters.
Took his shirt off and went in chest deep water just to rescue those horses.
But first, some important tips for anybody caught out in the cold.
Prolonged exposure to cold weather lowers our body temperature and can cause a life-threatening condition called hypothermia.
Some warning signs include slow breathing, slurred speech, confusion, and shivering. If hypothermia hits you from being out in the cold for too long, try to keep moving and stay hydrated.
And of course, never be afraid to ask for help. Always remember that wise actions prevent regret.
The small farm town of Planada, California was drowning in rising floodwaters. First responders worked for hours trying to rescue both humans and animals. Sheriff Vern Warnke and his team were desperately trying to save 8 horses that were trapped in a flooded stall. The sheriff's first response was to jump in and go to the distressed animals, but the sergeant of animal services insisted on going in himself.
He took his shirt off and left his breeches on and went in his stocking feet in chest-deep water just to rescue those horses. And he grabbed one, it kept its head up while we were trying to get that fence undone. Underwater, we had barbed wire fences, we had tangles. He ended up getting a minor injury on a piece of rebar. We had to pry boards off of these stalls to get these horses out. Of course, they're scared, they're panicked, but once we were able to free them from those pens, we led them literally out.
They transported the rescued animals to an evacuation area at the fairgrounds. With the animals in a safe, dry shelter, first responders then went back to saving other human lives.
We stayed in our uniform for 27 hours straight because it went from our normal day to immediately start evacuating people. We just needed to rescue as many people as we could.
Because of their courageous efforts, no lives were lost that day. But when the flood receded, the town of Planada was devastated.
The entire community of Planada, I don't think there was 10 houses that weren't affected. Every house went underwater.
Planada Elementary School suffered the same fate.
Came back the next morning after everything had flooded, and that's when we seen how much it had affected the school. We had our whole office wing flooded, our second grade wing, our first grade wing, and our third grade wing.
It was very emotional to think we prepared, but we never would have imagined all of these classrooms would be affected. It was about 90% of our school, 29 classrooms, and then our office spaces.
Superintendent Jose Gonzalez reached out to our sponsor, Belfour Property Restoration.
By Friday, Belfour was here at 7 o'clock with a crew of 30 to 40 people beginning the mitigation measures.
The damage was devastating. Everything was damaged. Everything was destroyed. It was a big job. Anything the water hit had to be cut out for material-wise and replaced 100%. Doors, drywall, flooring, cabinets, just about everything. We thought it would take 18 to 24 months to finish everything, but we had approval to go fast track, so that's why we worked 7 days a week.
Educators knew that it was imperative to get these young kids back on a regular routine.
To me, that brought a real big importance to try to get the kids back in, get them back into somewhat of a normal day so that it wouldn't affect them mentally or physically.
Incredibly, a project that was supposed to take almost 2 years was done in a fraction of that time.
The community is strong, and the school is the heart and soul of that community, and they came together and had that school open soon.
It is heartwarming, and it gives you a sense of hope when you see people coming together.
It was just really neat to see this community come together. They weren't going to allow it to fail. There was no other option. We will not let it fail, and they did.
Being a hero isn't easy, but these hardworking men and women wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Try not to take their swift action and bravery for granted. They truly deserve our admiration and appreciation.
And we appreciate you. Thanks so much for watching Hearts of Heroes. We'll see you next time.